Hi. Okay, so I need you to think about something. Sometime in the last few years, we became the most documented generation in history. Think about it. Your phone knows how many steps you took today, how long you slept, um, your screen time. It knows what songs you listened to at 2 a.m. or where you were last Friday night. We photograph our food constantly. What we almost never photograph is how it was made, who made it, or why it mattered. And I think that's a bit odd. Food is one of the biggest part of our lives, and yet we rarely stop to think about where it came from, how it was made, and the person who made it. We're really good at saving what things look like. We're not really good at saving what they meant. The funny thing about memory is that it rarely comes back when you go looking for it. It has a way of finding you instead. For me, it's the smell of ginger, garlic, and green chili hitting hotkey. I'll be walking past a kitchen somewhere, and suddenly I'm not there anymore. I'm back in my mom's kitchen. When I was sick growing up, my mom made this dish called suriyoi dahi. It's basically ginger, green chili, and garlic in ghee, then dahi, and then hot rotis folded in. That's it. I still make it when I have fever. Not because it's some miracle cure, but because for a moment, the smell brings my mom back. I think most of us have a dish like that. Maybe it's rasam when you're ill, aloo parathas on a Sunday morning, the kheer your nani makes every birthday. And here's the strange thing. We remember the feeling of those foods far more clearly than the recipe. We remember the taste, the smell, the person who made it. But ask us how it was actually made, most of us have no idea. I learned that the hard way after my mother died. There were dishes that she made I always assumed would always exist until one day they didn't. And I tried making them for myself. Nobody had written them down. No measurements, no memory, no method, no voice. And it was just memory. And memory fades a lot faster than you think. And that's why I started Nivala. It began with losing my mother's recipes. But when my nephew was born, it became a much bigger question. What exactly do you pass on to the next generation? I realized if families didn't start preserving the food the way food is actually made at home, an enormous amount of knowledge would quietly disappear. So we built a platform where anyone in any language could simply speak their family recipes into their phone in their own voice. Families can even turn those voices into printed cookbooks. Not because an app or a book solves any of it on its own, but if we don't build the tools to hold this kind of knowledge today, nobody else will. What really stayed with me wasn't just losing the recipes, it was realizing how much everyday knowledge quietly disappears when people do. Think about how food gets passed down in most Indian families. It's passed down through andas. It's one of those words that's almost impossible to translate, and the closest English gets is by feel. It's knowing that today the tomatoes are a little sour, so maybe you need to add a bit of sugar. It's knowing that this batch of atta maybe needs a little bit more water. It's a difference between a recipe that says 1 teaspoon of salt and someone who simply knows with their fingers when it's enough. You ask how much haldi, and the answer is bas itna sa. Which, if you didn't grow up in an Indian house, it's not remotely a measurement. And that's how most of us learned. Not from instructions, from standing beside someone, watching, learning, tasting, hearing things like, not yet, just a little bit more. You'll know when it's done. None of that ever makes it into a recipe. And that's what makes this moment so important. Many of us grew up in joint families where 2 or 3 generations shared a kitchen. You didn't consciously learn, you just absorbed it. And the trouble is, none of it was ever written down. And I sometimes think we might be the last generation that actually watched this happen. Today, grandparents often live in another city. The recipe is 1 phone call away until it's not. And there's another reason why all of this matters. India is not one cuisine. We're hundreds. The Undiyo or Gujarati family makes every winter, the modaks at Ganesh Chaturthi, the fish during Durga Puja, the pinnis that show up in every winter in a Punjabi home. So much of this food is tied to seasons, festivals, harvests, weather. The food is the calendar. It tells you what time of the year it is, who you're with, and where you're from. For years, Indian food traveled the world by getting simpler. Butter chicken, dal makhni, and by simpler I mean thousands of dishes, hundreds of techniques, ingredients that change maybe every 50 kilometers. All of it got flattened into creamy curries for a Western palate that found anything else too unfamiliar. Indian food was always being explained in relation to something else. Naan is like flatbread, dal is like soup. It made our food easy to order, easy to picture, easy to put on a menu. It couldn't explain any of the actual magic of what we actually ate at home. And then the world started wanting the original, the regional, the specific, the version made in one particular home by one particular person. Last year, a chef named Vijay Kumar won the James Beard Award for Best Chef in New York State. It's basically the Oscars for food. Now, he grew up in a village outside Madurai. As a kid, he would forage for snails in paddy fields. Back then, that kind of food was dismissed as poor people food. But today, in his restaurant Sema in New York, he serves that very dish, Nathai Pirathal, snails cooked in onions, tomato, and tamarind. And I love what that says. A kid from a village in Tamil Nadu had to move halfway across the world, open a restaurant in New York, win one of the biggest awards in food before any of us in India started looking at that cuisine differently. I don't think we've discovered our own country yet. Because the people who carry that knowledge aren't standing on stages. They're standing in our very own kitchens. And the problem is, in a lot of families, that knowledge is already on its way out. We preserve photographs, documents, jewelry, watches, but entire worlds of everyday knowledge just quietly disappears. There's no backup, no archive, it's just gone. Maybe none of this mattered as much before, but I think it matters today. Most of you are about to enter a phase of life where home becomes a place of transit, a place that you visit, not a place you live in. College, hostels, new cities, eventually jobs. Some of you may move abroad. And one day, out of nowhere, you're going to crave something specific, not restaurant food, not fast food, something that tastes like home. And maybe you'll call somebody and ask, how do you make that thing that you used to make? And maybe they'll say, I don't know, I just do it. Or worse, there'll be nobody left to ask. And I think about that a lot, especially because we're growing up in a world where we keep getting told that AI can do almost everything. It generates images, writes essays, composes music, clones voices. But try this. Ask AI for your dadi's recipe. Not the generic version, hers. The exact way she makes it. The thing that she added in the end but never measured. The version that's connected to your house, your family, your memory. It wouldn't know that because nobody ever taught it. And here's the part worth understanding. AI can't reconstruct what was never recorded. It can only work with what humans have already saved. So the question is not whether the technology is powerful enough. The question is whether we use it now to capture what's still in the room with us. Once it's recorded, the technology can do extraordinary things. It can translate it, structure it, archive it, pass it on. It can't just invent it. That part is still on us. That's a real problem. It's not that the recipes are disappearing. It's that we never considered them important enough to save in the first place. What if preserving your grandmother's recipes was as simple as asking her to speak it out loud? Not just the language she speaks in, but in the language she thinks in. Punjabi, Tamil, Marwari, Bengali, Malayalam, Tulu. Because a recipe carries more than instructions. It carries phrases, affections, corrections, the small things that they always say. Beta dekh ke, bas, abhi mat dalo. Somebody can now speak a recipe into a phone in any of these languages, and technology can structure it and archive it. Technology is not the important part. The important part is deciding that it matters. I'm not saying that everyone here needs to become a chef. That's not the point. This isn't really a talk about cooking. It's a talk about attention. Attention to the person who cooks for you. Attention to the fact that when somebody says thoda sa, there might be 40 years of knowledge in that pinch. So here's what I would like you to do. Before your next holiday ends, before the next festival, before everyone leaves the kitchen, pick that one dish. the one you would miss the most. Stand beside the person who makes it, record them, ask them where they learnt it, who taught them, what they changed. Years from now, you won't just hear the recipe, you'll hear the pauses, the laughter, the corrections, the way they pronounce the spices, the language they thought in. The recording will not just preserve a recipe, it'll preserve a person. Because one day you'll taste something somewhere and think, no, not like theirs. And you'll realize recipes were not just recipes, they were people. Some of the most important things that we inherit are the things that we never thought to save. And the good news is, most of them are sitting at your dining table right now. Thank you.